G'day everyone and welcome back to Critical AFL on YouTube. Since these FaceTime updates are going to be unavoidable once the season kicks off with tighter time constraints just between games, I might as well introduce myself. I'm Damien, Damo if you like, and I hope everyone's had a really good start to 2025 because we're already a month down. But the best part of that is that we're already close to the 2025 footy season, starting from a scratch match against Richmond on the 17th on KO, I believe. So that'll precede a preseason hit out 2 weeks later against North Melbourne, an official one, also should be on KO. And then another 2 weeks later, we'll be at round one. So right off the bat, there's some positives. It's just the loading that goes into the season. We're going to have a really nice, flat 2-week block of playing, ramping up that intensity, but also giving the players time to recover. Because once that season starts, those 1 week intervals, it basically becomes an arm wrestle to make sure guys are fit, can still train, and are recovered for the following week. So there's a positive there. The negative is that missing out on O-round or opening round just means that there's a cohort of teams, 8 sides, I believe, that will get an extra week off mid-season. So that little chance to recover, that'll happen more times for those teams than us. But given West Coast's ladder position last year, I just don't think that's a privilege that we can expect. You can give your thoughts on O-round in general in the comments if you like. I'm kind of neither here nor there. It's nice for the preseason to start, but it does disadvantage some teams. But now to the preseason, which is really what we're going to try and cover in this video. It's going to be a little review that mostly covers injuries because that's the main thing you're going to get out of a preseason update. But there's also a few whispers that are floating around just about who's in form. And it's not so much the senior stars that we know are good, but it's going to be little tidbits about some of the up-and-coming players that are impressing. So that's another thing that we'll cover, but it's mostly going to be the injuries. And we'll start off with the 2 most significant ones, which are Elliot Yeo and Dom Sheed. But then the West Coast injury update did come out this week, which did give a lot more players as well who won't get a clean run up to the season. But those are the 2 ones we'll start with. Kicking off with Dom Sheed. So I'm sure almost every West Coast fan knows that he's done an ACL. And that means his season's over. And I think right off the bat, there's already been a fair few people who think there's a good chance that his AFL career is possibly over too. If I'm being honest, I'd say I'm probably one of those people. But I just want to be careful that this isn't one of those channels where we go down the path of speculating about players being dropped or delisted and just jumping on them the moment they might seem past it. Just the truth is, my personal view on AFL footballers is that even making their way onto the AFL lists, it's quite a remarkable achievement. And generally, I'm just really disappointed for Sheed. It's a very cruel injury to have happen now, given how many injuries have kept him from being at his best over the last few years. And he's a guy who had a ton of experience going into 2025. Again, not trying to be funny, but that experience I was really excited for him imparting onto the waffle side and all the young mids that we've got floating around there. It would have been really nice to see someone like him that they can really base themselves around, really learn off, and also knowing that the guy is a ready-made AFL player any day of the week who could step into the squad on a moment's notice anytime he was needed without having to find his feet. So that's just the Dom Sheed update. You'd say wishing all the best, but I've actually done a couple of ACLs myself, and it's just a long road. And he's really just going to have a very, I think, tough year. Not sure what sort of certainty he'll get from the club, but all the best to Dom Sheed in his recovery. The other big injury news is Elliot Yeo. At this stage, his combined knee and ankle injuries look like they'll keep him from playing in the first round or 2. That's just the word coming out of West Coast. And then more than those first couple of weeks, though, it's also going to be pretty disappointing for Elliot Yeo because he's a player who puts a ton of foundational work into his pre-seasons to not only putting himself in that elite tier of players in the comp, which he still is, but also to keep himself on the park consistently. Last season, we saw that with that really good pre-season he had. Played a lot of football, which was the first time in years. So hopefully the timing of this setback doesn't affect either of those 2 things too badly. But on the flip side of that, there is a little positive that I thought almost straight away relating to Yowie. It's not so much glad that he's injured, but it's over the preseason. And I think the exposure that means that some of the younger stars is going to get in the midfield in particular during the preseason. It's going to be a real treat for fans, that Richmond game and that North Melbourne game. And the reason I say that is because I did see Tim Kelly is listed in the Indigenous All-Stars game, which is on Saturday the 15th of February, which means it's unlikely he'll play 2 days later in the hit-out against Richmond. So for anybody excited at the idea of Elijah Hewitt, Bo Allen and Clay Hall, but also Tom Gross and Jack Hutchinson, which I will get into later, just some of those rumours coming out of the club, and just other youngsters getting genuine minutes in the midfield, Monday the 17th of February should hopefully be that opportunity alongside Harley Reid, who's already pretty well entrenched in that part of the ground. So yeah, as important as Tim Kelly and Elliot Yeo are to the success of the team once the official season starts, they're guys that fans can really already rely on. They're a known quantity, so you just need them fully fit. You don't need to be watching, whether they're going to be a good player during the preseason. The only thing you might watch for is to see if they still got it, but I think they still got it. Other players mentioned in the injury update included Harley Reid, Liam Baker and Jake Waterman, who from the explanation provided will be fully fit. And they've all basically just had brief periods deloading from minor injuries. Callum Jamieson, who's an important key defensive depth player, may be a little behind the pack by the time round one arrives due to a delay to full training from surgery last year, I think to his knee and ankle both. Rhett Barzo is in a similar category, having surgery on a broken foot and will be starting his rebuild from a bit further back. That one's really disappointing for fans, for myself as a fan especially, because he's one of the guys I predicted in my emerging player lists that we made for this year. And it just so seems that he just always seems to be dealing with something of this nature, something interrupting his preseason at this time of year. So it's been really rough seeing those run-ups that he's got to the season constantly interrupted. But hopefully that's just not something that will become just a permanent feature every year. I'm sure it won't. There's been a lot of examples of that across the AFL. So it brings me to another part of the preseason review, which is form watch, now that we've covered the injuries. It's a bit of a soft science because basically the best you're getting is feedback from players and staff at the club about who's surprising them at training. Obviously, early December, a lot of feedback was around Ruben Ginbey and Elijah Hewitt, which I did cover in one of the videos. Ginbey getting the credit for his physical shape and fitness, while Elijah Hewitt was turning a few heads with his intensity. Since then, Jack Graham has also made a really big impression for his physical fitness. There's been a lot of talk that basically him and Ginbey are now really strong competitors for all those trials, whereas I think Ginbey kind of sat alone there. The more interesting whispers in general, though, have actually been about guys like Archer Reid and Tom Gross, who, I'll be honest, I've slipped under my radar a little bit. I did see Archer Reid's performance in the Waffle last year, and he's got huge upside. I just didn't expect him to come good as quick as he is apparently coming good for a guy of his size and his age. Tom Gross apparently made a huge impression in the recent intra-club scratch match. Traditionally, those intra-club scratch matches start with what's called a best versus the rest lineup. So usually if you're looking at the social media posts, you see who's wearing the blue shirts. This is actually a mate of mine who told me this. This is how he uses a little indicator as to who's in the starting lineup every year and who's in the yellow. So for that first half, it's the best players, usually in blue, playing against all the other guys in the Eagles squad who are trying to break their way into it. And the word out of that game was that Tom Gross was pretty much everywhere for the rest in yellow and really held his own against that starting lineup. Archer Reid's feedback is a little less specific. He basically gets mentioned every time a teammate is asked who's surprised them at training so far. Usually emphasis is on his ball smarts as well as his skills below his knees. For a bloke who's 203 centimetres tall, so for key forward depth, I think fans are really going to want to start watching the Waffle games this year because there just isn't going to be enough room for everyone in the AFL squad. You've got leading goal kickers like Oscar Allen and Jake Waterman who are walk-in starters in any side every day of the week. You've got Jack Williams, who not only is a really surprise packet for someone picked as late as he was in the draft, but he's also really proven himself as that supporting ruck role as well, which I think most clubs, minus I think Melbourne's little attempt and Fremantle still trying to mix Sean Darcy and Luke Jackson together, except that you don't really want to be playing two pure ruckmen in a side. So waiting behind them, there's guys like Archer Reid now, Job Shanahan, and to be honest, if Matt Flynn lands that primary primary ruck wall, which there's no guarantees of. And Bailey Williams will be in that queue as well. The other rumour going around is that Jack Hutchinson is one of the guys who's in favour in the midfield. Fans might remember that in the final half of 2024, and that's the final half of the final game of 2024, Jared Schofield swung him into the midfield against Geelong after we were absolutely dominated in that space. And he actually turned the game on just in that part of the ground on its head. So it's really good to see that performance wasn't forgotten, since there wasn't a follow-up week for him to prove anymore. And as we all know, Schofield isn't calling his shots anymore. Anyway, that's just about it for the preseason update at this stage. If you've got any of your own thoughts or observations, just let me know in the comments. I think anyone who's commented knows I love having these chats after the video comes out. This stuff is a passion of mine. But hopefully there's a lot of food for thought in this update for fans to get excited about. Particularly with some of the vacancies that Elliot Yeo and Tim Kelly might be making during the preseason for the young mids to get their chance. The next video that we'll be putting out is going to be a thorough review from the Richmond scratch match. So please, if you haven't already, take a moment to subscribe to this channel for more of those updates. It's a huge help to me being able to continue to run the channel, and hopefully it also is a benefit to anyone who follows getting the ongoing content. So cheers again, and until next time,